Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am joined today by my John Madden to Pat Summerall, one Mr. Brian E. Roach. I thought you would like that, Brian, after talking about John Madden football just the other day. I expect you to expect a few phrases of the Pat Summerall variety when he used to be in the video game. It was like, what do you think about Juju Smith-Schuster, John? And he would do something like that. So you have to come up with like a witty, Maddenism to go along with that.
Well, I like Juju because, he goes up and boom, he hits the guy. He just hits the guy.
Boom.
Boom.
Boom is everything. Boom was tough acting to Tenactin. I mean, how can you forget that? Boom, that was just so great. I would say John Madden is sorely missed as a color commentator. And with Pat Summerall, he probably had his best work. I think with Al Michaels and, the whole transition into Sunday Night Football type deal was pretty awesome too. So I won't discredit Al Michaels. Al Michaels, I think, slips a little bit of something in his coffee or his drink during some of these broadcasts recently over the last year or two. But, it adds a little bit of color there. Has anyone been as good as John Madden behind the microphone as the color guy? I don't know. But I know you certainly add color to this broadcast, Brian.
Why, thank you. I like to add, shades of gray.
I hope it's not 50 Shades, but anyways.
I don't know anything about that.
Nor do I. It's a lie. The wife forced me to watch the movies. They were meh. Still better than being forced to watch Twilight when I was younger. So we'll leave the sparkly vampires at that. Today we've got, we promised some pet peeves, right? So,
yes.
I mean, this isn't just going to be, we're not going to rant on Aaron Rodgers anymore. I mean, we'll just let that be. He will come up in this conversation, though, because it's like the predictions for some of these divisions and teams and what everything's being touted as, it's impossible not to, because he's like intertwined in a lot of this, not only himself as being listed as a top player, but also, the Packers being listed as a good team and stuff like that. So, we've culled some stuff from around the interweb and also print media, because you know what I have in my hand? I'm going to start with this, actually. It's my trusty yearly tradition. This goes back, I think I mentioned to people, I'm 37 years old. I think I've been getting these. My uncle used to get these when I was, maybe not even a teenager. I think I used to read them when I was like 11 or 12. And I have a lot of back issues still that I sometimes I'll pull them out and I'll read what their predictions were, like 10 years ago. Even going back on fantasy football magazines that I purchased, like a year or two ago. It's funny to see, who was the next big thing that was coming out, either as a rookie or a big free agent signing or something of that nature. So I have with me Lindy Sports Pro Football 2019 preview, and they are tagline, the America's leading football authority. And the reason I've always liked Lindy's is because they kind of tell you something about every player. Now, the only unfortunate thing is here, it says display until September 10th, 2019. I think I purchased this like maybe last week, and it's already out of date in some cases with players that are no longer on rosters and things like, and that happens with print media. And as such, you have to put in some predictions ahead of time and get ahead of the curve. And it makes me laugh tongue in cheek, though, when I read some of it. You can tell that there's different people writing different things, but Howard Balzer is responsible for the predictions section of this on page 12, if anyone wants to follow along at home, and has this. And the AFC North, as no surprise to everyone, you want to talk about being on a jock. Is anyone not on the Cleveland Browns right now? Or they're like all over them, like a teenager with puppy dog eyes for anyone that they're infatuated with or think they're in love with. Well, everyone's in love with the Cleveland Browns right now. And he says here there are a lot of pieces to like beyond Baker Mayfield. Still, Freddie Kitchens says to show he could be a strong head coach. When we break out the Browns, we'll talk a little bit more about this. We'll touch on it a little bit today. But all the infatuation over the moves they made this offseason, a lot of people are excited. Still, they're a team that hasn't had a winning season in how long? Hasn't made the playoffs in how long? Are they trending in the right direction? Mayhaps. But that's not where I really take exception to this. I mean, they always dog the Steelers usually in these predictions, and this is no different this year, where the Cincinnati Bengals are listed as being second in the AFC North, and they're going to finish second, Brian. Can Zach Taylor lead a team? Well, that's the same question I have about Freddie Kitchens. But, we'll find out soon enough. The Bengals come in second, mostly because of issues with the Steelers and Ravens. That's correct, folks. Okay, so they got the Steelers as third here, Howard Balzer does. He says, everyone touts Juju Smith-Schuster, but he won't have Antonio Brown for protection. The defense also has issues. Yikes. Didn't we just prove? I mean, this is just like glossing over, like, we were just talking about this too, like, oh, should we do like certain previews for certain teams? It's like, sometimes I have a cursory knowledge of what's going on. Sometimes some teams are so erratic in their constant mood swings, how often they change the everything. Look at Arizona. I don't even know how to comment about the Arizona Cardinals because everything that they did last year was a change, or this year was a change from last year, was a change from the year before. You know what I mean? And I think some of these guys just pull, the same copy paste from the previous year. Juju Smith, okay, he puts Juju Smith-Schuster. He won't have Antonio Brown for protection. We were already talking about the magic age of 31 and how the Steelers have moved on from like Santonio Holmes or Mike Wallace as their wide receiver one, and Big Ben is still there. Big Ben by far. You would agree with this, I think. I think just about anyone with any sensibility would agree. Who's the best quarterback in the division? Roethlisberger is. He's still there. And, you're talking about whether Juju will still get the same stats or not just because AB wasn't there. He may get more because AB isn't there. I mean, I find it very insulting to also say the defense also has issues. Perhaps they do, but did this Howard Balzer not pay attention to anything the Steelers did this offseason?
Yeah, look. Let me first address the on the jock of or on their nuts, however you say it. Sacktown will have to actually teach me how to say it. First of all, teams become the flavor of the month every now and then. And while they like to remember that the Browns managed to win some games last season, they don't seem to bring up the fact that when it mattered, they didn't. Not bitter. No, not me. No, not at all.
Not at all. They would have bailed the Steelers out. It's a bailout, so I'm not as upset about it as I am in past years where Jesse caught it, or that horrible San Diego Chargers Kansas City Chiefs game that went to OT, riddled with penalties and all kinds of other stuff that screwed that was the 8-8 season. I think that they would have slid in, and they didn't deserve to then, to be honest. They slid at the end of the year this year, but I mean, when it came down to crunch time, you're right. Cleveland couldn't get it done against the Ravens.
Yeah. So I get it. They added OBJ. They added some other guys. They had a nice, I guess a nice draft. It wasn't that great, but it was okay. We keep saying the same things over and over again. You got a team full of personalities, and we've already seen some drama coming out of that locker room. They need to slow their roll. The Browns very well may be a good team, and they very well may not. They won't be the 0-16 Browns. I grant you that. They may not be a winning team yet. It may take some time for a new head coach to wrangle all these folks onto the same page. So they just, I get it. You see fancy toys and you jump on the nuts or the jock or whatever. And it's a trendy thing, it's a trendy thing. Oh, the Browns, they've never won in forever since they came back to Cleveland. They haven't won in a doodly squat. So let's pick them.
Yeah.
Because they made some moves, and if it works, we'll look like we're geniuses. And if it doesn't, well, we just got caught up in the hype. Yeah, they're caught up in the hype.
More or less the lovable losers. I'm going to mention the Ravens spot here, fourth place finish predicted here by Balzer. The defense suffered monstrous losses, and the challenge will be to make Lamar Jackson a passer and not a runner. It's about the only thing I agree with in this whole analysis. Jumping back to Cleveland, and I don't want to make it a whole Cleveland episode, but 7-8-1 last year. Okay, what have they changed versus everybody's like, well, they won some games last year and they're going to be proof. They're going to be so much better. They've improved, right? And they have 9 offensive starters returning and only 7 on defense. And I understand, you're adding Odell Beckham, but Jarvis Landry got out statistically played by Tyler Boyd of the Cincinnati Bengals with Jeff Driscoll as his quarterback for like 7 games. That doesn't necessarily strike fear in me. Nick Chubb, I like the pick. I like when they took it. I think he'll be a fine running back. But that offensive line has not changed, and they got rid of Kevin Zeitler. I mean, it's just that kind of stuff like blows my mind to just overlook offensive line. Now, where they do kind of scare me is what they're doing with the defensive line. They let Ziggy Ogba go. And they added Sheldon Richardson and Olivier Vernon to pair with Larry Ogunjobi and Myles Garrett. And the reason Vernon doesn't necessarily scare me as being Olivier Vernon, right? He scares me more or less because I think it could free up Myles Garrett, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. He's a freak, okay? And he should be. He was number 1 pick overall. That guy is maturing and can be a real headache. However, is it going to matter, like, if you go up against a good offensive line like the Steelers, is any of that front four going to matter when the other 7 guys on the field are, Jannard Avery, Christian Kirksey, Joe Schobert, Morgan Burnett, Demarius Randall, maybe Denzel Ward, and perhaps a rookie in Greedy Williams who we don't know really anything about. We were high on him. And then, as tends to be, I was high on Andrew Billings one time, and then he slid into the 4th round, and you're like, what the heck happened? Well, this happened with Greedy Williams, so some NFL teams know something to have picked X amount of corners over that. It's not to say he's going to be good or bad, but the reason I bring all these things up, those are questions. Those are question marks. And when you get rid of some of your starters, you're putting all these new pieces in, you changed your coaching staff. That doesn't necessarily equate success. I understand the Browns were 7-8-1, okay? The Steelers were 9-6-1 and also played in some very close games that they could have or should have won. And they didn't, and they missed the playoffs because of that. You think the Steelers should have beat the Broncos? I do. Or the Chargers? I do. But penalties, turnovers, Raiders was next. 3 losses in a row right there. I think they should have beat the Saints too, where they were gifted on pass interference calls. So they're in close games and nobody's giving them any credit because they lose one guy. They lose one guy, Antonio Brown, who may be now on the backside of his career. You already seen the heir apparent that's there. Would I rather have had Antonio Brown not go on off the deep end and still be on the team? Sure. Who wouldn't? He's an all-time franchise guy. But as you hold on to some of these guys, would you rather have had Troy Polamalu retire a year earlier or Hines Ward? You kind of struggle and see them kind of like fade off. You know what I mean? And I think AB is a year from that happening. I think he's still going to have a good 2019, but I think a lot is being put into that. And in fact, Brian, let me read you this other synopsis real quick because this is you may hear me flipping some pages. This is real old school here, folks. No computer clicks or keyboard tapping here. Pittsburgh Steelers, this is actually kind of fair here. I will say this is fair. Losing disgruntled free agent running back Le'Veon Bell for no compensation and enigmatic receiver Antonio Brown for 3rd and 5th round picks didn't faze the Steelers. They had already adequately replaced Bell last year with James Conner and then called on their scouting expertise at receiver to unearth the next Steelers receiver to watch, Deontay Johnson of Toledo. But what should soften reports of the Steelers' imminent demise, however, was drafting of linebacker Devin Bush and cornerback Justin Lane, who fill huge needs in the team's somewhat disappointing defense. I think that is entirely fair, and that's the point that I've been trying to make. The Steelers made a lot of moves that may not have been as flashy as trading for your first-round pick for Odell Beckham Jr., but they're going to fill what other little holes that they have, and this can turn out to be a better overall team that played in just as many close games that they lost as Cleveland did last year and just didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, we've covered this before, and I think it's a fair and accurate statement to make. The Steelers played not up to what you would expect of them last year, but there were obviously internal issues. You clearly had somebody screaming his head off, demanding the ball. I won't mention who. And, Ben responded to that at times, probably when he shouldn't have. And they weren't in sync. But they certainly didn't miss Le'Veon Bell. Not in, that tired old storyline dragged out through the entire year. How they missed Le'Veon Bell. They didn't miss Le'Veon Bell, not for a moment. I don't think they will miss Antonio Brown. And that doesn't, again, it's not a disparaging mark to Antonio Brown. It's simply that they will find ways to replace that production and move forward. I just think that's going to happen. Now, because we've talked about them too long, I don't remember who we talked about next or what we talked about next on that list.
The Bengals?
Good. Well, hey, let me just say this. I said this after the draft. I give them credit for drafting some offensive line help. And not making the dumb move and just going, look, fast receiver in the first round, let's do it. That they could have done, but it's the Bengals. Look, I don't have any faith in Andy Dalton at this point. Maybe others do. I think AJ Green is, as I said before, I think he is a elite talent who is like Antonio Brown, probably on the backside of his career. Unlike Antonio Brown, AJ Green has been injured often over the past 2 seasons. And once those injury bugs start to bite receivers, that usually spells some troubled times ahead. So when you take AJ Green out of the mix of their receiving core, I'm sorry, I'm not afraid of anybody else they have. I'm just not. And I get it. They have a halfway decent, running attack. They still have a moderately good defensive line. They may have some better linebackers showing up if Carl Lawson is better this year than last year. We'll see. And they certainly have a stable of corners because they kept drafting them in the first round. But all of that put together has not equated to much for the Bengals over the past few seasons. And you got a new head coach. Doesn't mean new head coaches can't succeed. But I think that the Bengals will be lucky to be third in the division, quite frankly, and at best.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily, coaching change could be good or bad. I mean, I think a lot of people look at the Jeff Fisher, LA Rams thing, with Sean McVay, an immediate turnaround, but they fail to see how many players were changed over that period, too. And Jeff Fisher didn't necessarily have a whole lot of time. He was trying to do the Steve McNair thing and sit Jared Goff behind, Case Keenum and, trying to do the right thing there. And that may have paid off for McVay in the long run, too. You know what I mean? But the Bengals, they haven't had a winning season since 2015. So this isn't just a, worn, torn, injury, ravaged team in 2018, though they were. Tyler Boyd went on injury reserve, I believe, by the end of the year, too. Tyler Eifert was, right out the gate almost, snake bitten. AJ Green's been banged up. But Andy Dalton might be on a short leash, and then they're dealing with a fourth round rookie quarterback, which we've gone through this before. Anybody taken late pretty much out of the first round, and first rounders aren't a guarantee either, but quarterback is a very hard position to find somebody at unless you're going from the cream of the crop. It very seldom does it happen where you get somebody that's, undrafted like Tony Romo, and then even then some,
right.
he has his critics too. So, there's this at play too. Is Dalton on a short leash because the contract he signed is kind of something they could easily get out of after this year, the way they structured it. So I get it. They still have, Joe Mixon. They got a new guard. They got a new tackle. They added to that last year too when they made a trade and they got Billy Price, they drafted last year as a center. So, four of those 5 guys now over the last 2 seasons, they've finally evolved. And much like the Steelers had to do, earlier in the decade when they ended up adding like David DeCastro and Marcus Gilbert and whatnot, I think the Bengals are headed in the right direction there. It still doesn't mean that their defense isn't aging or old in certain spots. They still have, very dominant players at different places. But, again, I don't know. It's a quarterback quarterback-driven league, and when you look at the wide receiver core and you look at a guy they took in the first round in John Ross, and then they were trying to shop him to another team in a trade, I mean, that doesn't necessarily bode confidence in what you have. I don't know. I look at the Browns, and I definitely look at the Browns as a team that should be competitive just based on what they have on paper. But another part of me still gets the vibe of Chip Kelly arriving in Philadelphia and the entire dream team with like Michael Vick and all the receivers they have. They have like Deshaun Jackson. They may still have Macklin even at that point. They added running backs and all these players that were supposed to be amazing, and they look great. Like week 1, week 2, this is the new NFL. They're running 80 plays on offense, and they're very, this is very dynamic. And then, beep,
yep.
Fizzled balloon flying into the air. So, that's more or less where the Steelers, I think, aren't being. I want to say we really want to call this episode like the Rodney Dangerfield to get no respect. I think the Steelers are going to be good without having their egos inflated and by basically being tossed as underdogs. I looked at these power rankings. There's one from ESPN that was posted not too long ago. Chiefs, Saints, Rams, Patriots, same old. Colts. You can make an argument based on how that team and the Chargers finished. The Bears, the Texans at 8. Meh. Projected wins, they have it at like 8.5. They have some of these as like high. So like Patriots 10.5, Rams 10.1, chance to make playoffs, stuff like that. So you got to scroll for a little while because you got to go past the Falcons, the Eagles, the Vikings, the Packers, the Titans, and yes, I said the Titans, and then the Seahawks. So they have 3 AFC South teams. And did I also list 3 NFC North teams? I sure did, didn't I? Mm-hmm. Before I even get down to number 15 where the Browns are, before you even get one AFC North team. So the Browns are 15, the Steelers are 16, and the Ravens are 17. This is somebody that's copying someone else's homework and doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do with these guys. They have the Browns. Okay, the Browns are at 8.8 projected wins. And I've said before, I think, plus or minus 8, I think might be fair for them. I may have even gone with 7, 8-8, 9-7, something like that, 7-9. I could easily see that. I've before in the past thought they were a 5-win team, and then they didn't win one game. So don't take what I say for gospel. 51.5% chance to make the playoffs. You jump to the Steelers, and they're at 45.8%. Which is just a nudge better than the Ravens, and they both have the Steelers and Ravens at 8.5 wins projected. I don't ever want to bet against the Ravens because I know what Harbaugh has done, but they have a lot of young guys they have to count on, and it's a lot of unproven stuff. But it doesn't always mean, we talk about this with free agency, Brian, it doesn't always mean that the shiny toy, the teams that win free agency, didn't the Dolphins win free agency a year or two ago, and what have they done? Mm-hmm. What have you done for me lately? It's the not-for-long league. So, you don't necessarily need all these all-star names. We always talk about players who are like washed up or beyond their prime or injured or can't play anymore. And everybody's like, oh, the Steelers should sign them. And we always make fun of that. But that's kind of what the Browns kind of thing feels like to me. Like you're compiling an all-star team and everybody's very enamored with the all-star team. And the Steelers aren't necessarily getting a whole lot of respect, nor really, even the Ravens could be all right. I think the bigger problem with the Ravens is probably quarterback, and that's where I'm at with the Browns as well, because, Baker Mayfield is a second-year guy. He played half a season last year. He threw a bunch of touchdowns. Let's see him do it again, because we've had this same thing where there's one-hit wonders, one-year wonders. You've had, like, the Dak Prescotts of the world lit the world on fire, and then it kind of returned down to earth. And for me, I know all this is speculative, and that's all the more we can do on speculation, but the Steelers have such a long track record, whereas the Browns do not, that I just simply do not understand where and why they put these teams where they do in these rankings.
I sometimes think that they may say, what is this team above this team? Shake the magic 8 ball, and if it says yes, then that's what they do. I don't know. Look, I am going to say something to that may annoy some people, may not. I don't know, and many people may agree with. But in this day and age, in the clickbait day and age that we live in, the national media is chasing clickbait. That's what they're chasing. And you know, so it's funny when you talk about something like, he's old school. It's like, I can't believe you bought a magazine. I can't even believe they still sell magazines.
It's a tradition, man. I don't think I would have if I hadn't been getting them for so long. I look forward to this, and I also really enjoy, I don't get a penny for saying this, but I really enjoy the Sports Illustrated fantasy book that they put out, too. I think it's one of the best. I think those two are two of the better, but, I don't know why I continue to read this rag if they keep trashing my team, man.
That's a valid point. And you start to question where and this with the Steelers, and I'm sure every fan base says this, but with the Steelers, there is just I don't know whether it's jealousy. I don't know whether it is just that the Steelers have been consistently good and competitive for so long that they just want to discount them. Because they're not dominating. The Steelers are not dominating the way they did in the 70s. And that's fine. But they're still really good. And in most cases, they're a team loaded with a tremendous amount of talent. But they tend to win gritty. You don't see the Steelers are not the Patriots of that first Randy Moss era where they're just blowing everybody out, $9 billion to 3, right? It's but they win games. They're tough, and they're in almost every game that they play. Sometimes we accuse them of playing down to teams. Sometimes, we feel like maybe they're a little mistake prone. And some of that is just bad luck, and some of it isn't. But I think that they just seem to get discounted, and people. The shiny toy syndrome just occurs, and that's certainly what's going on with the Browns. Now, I want to talk about the Ravens because I personally, I just want to say this. I personally think the Ravens are a hot mess, and I'm going to continue to say that until they prove to me they're not. They usually do because I say it almost every year.
Yeah.
Over the past few. Now, I did not say that when they were the Ravens of Ray Lewis and the defense was always up there with ours it was either us or them that was the number one defense. But right now I feel like they're a hot mess. I didn't like their draft particularly that well. I don't like what they're trying to do, and I don't know that it's going to be successful. And that's nothing against Lamar Jackson. I just don't know that it's going to turn into what they expect it to unless he can really improve his accuracy and his passing. Because otherwise they're going to become a one-dimensional team, and I don't think that one dimension is going to get them as far as they want. Okay, that being said.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't necessarily hate Lamar Jackson. I don't like to root against any of these young guys and just be like, oh, this guy is totally garbage. But I think more or less, and we said this last year when they drafted him, the metamorphosis of this team, does it work to, towards Lamar Jackson's strengths, or will it, put a spotlight on his weaknesses? I think that's very fair to say because I don't see a whole lot on that offense where it's just like, man, this could be a disaster.
Right. I don't know. If he can perform, they can be a good team. If he can't perform, or he can't perform at the level that they're going to need him to perform, different story altogether. And we aren't going to know that until after it happens. But I will say this, from what we have seen, it does not look likely.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I really don't want to speak about that just yet, because here's another thing too, where it's come around and bite you in the rear. Guy has a bad first year, turns around and has a decent second year. I still feel in that same way that Baker Mayfield was the best fit. If the Browns are going to draft a guy, he's the best fit there. I think Hugh Jackson was a dunce. And, moving on from him is probably the better thing for that Browns team. But they've done this stuff before. What was it? Mike Pettin. I mean, they got close with 7-9 as their record, and Brian Hoyer. They tried to roll with Chudzinski for a year, 4-12 with Jason Campbell. They drafted Brandon Whedon and tried to do that for a while. They had Colt McCoy, and there's just countless times where, either Colt McCoy didn't look, or Brady Quinn or somebody. These guys had promise. Even Derek Anderson took the reins at one point with Romeo Crennel, the longest tenured coach that they've had in over a decade. Romeo Crennel was there for 4 years, and Crennel got them to 10-6, but they still missed the playoffs based on tiebreakers and everything. So they haven't been in the postseason since 2002 under Butch Davis. They were 9-7, and guess who they lost the wild card game to? They got swept 3 times in the same season with the Steelers. I mean, that's going way back. I mean, Bill Cowher was the coach there, so there's no remnants of that team from back then. But just over the last couple of years, there's stuff that's been turning over. We talked about all of these young guys. Now they're trying to bring in some veteran guys. I think they're headed in the right direction, but I just think that for what everyone says about them, there's no reason to not say good things about the Steelers. Now, this is where it all comes together, kind of full circle. Is I looked up, ESPN also did a power ranking by division. And, the way they listed it is the teams are in order of the way they finished. So they have the NFC North as the top one. We were talking about this in the back rooms as to whether or not the Bears, Vikings, Packers, and Lions, is this the best division in football overall with 4, competitive teams? And I was debating about this, and believe it or not, the ESPN guys here, Greg Rosenthal is more or less responsible for this, but it's from around the NFL. They have the AFC North listed second here, and he says it's hard to find a team truly lagging in talent. Ravens are undergoing their most dramatic transformation on both sides of the ball in more than a decade, but they have the organizational culture to survive it with flair. That's the thing that scares me.
Yeah.
The Browns do not have organizational culture to survive anything, let alone do it with flair. Yet. Okay?
Yet.
The Steelers and Browns could have the 2 most talented rosters in the entire conference. Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Even if they have vastly different track records over the last decade. The Bengals don't dazzle with defensive firepower, yet new coach Zach Taylor inherits a roster with many clear weaknesses. Coming out of this division with a playoff bye is going to be difficult because of its depth. I totally agree with that. That's one thing that probably has me more concern with the 2019 season. It's the thing we always talk about. The Patriots get to go 5-1 in their division and cakewalk to a bye. Steelers have to, butt heads with the Ravens. Now maybe an improved Browns team, and a healthy Bengals team will still compete and has been competitive with them, even though the Steelers have, pretty much used them like a dirty dish rag over the last 5-6 years. They own them, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. And all it takes is for the Steelers to have like a brain fart like they did with Denver or Oakland and turn the ball over and leave the window open long enough, which they nearly did in week 1 up in Cleveland last season. So, I get it, but this is a little more respectful here, I think, to the team overall to place them there. I don't actually have a problem with the NFC North being listed. The Lions are supposed to be better. The Bears obviously improved. The Vikings took a step back as well and missed the playoffs, so they're still kind of in that window. They have Kirk Cousins they paid a boatload of money to. The Packers are in rebuild mode as well, and that's where the Aaron Rodgers thing comes up, because we're going to turn our focus to individual players too here in a second and how they don't get any respect. But before I finish all this, I think we have to bring up one name, a very important name, a name from the past. Maurice Jones-Drew. Yikes. Here's a guy, when you talk about putting the name experts in quotation marks, who was he doing that with? Was it Willie McGinnis, or I don't think it was Rod Woodson, was it? I'm trying to think who he was paired with, because whoever was on there, they had the little touchscreen board as far as wins, and they're doing the same thing we're doing, are trying to predict by game wins and losses and overall record. And I think he ended up with the Steelers at like 10-6 or 9-7, and MJD comes in and starts hitting L and L all over the place. He has like the Steelers, getting swept by the Browns, for example. While that very well could happen, this is, you're jumping off a cliff to just show your hatred of all things Steel City here. I don't know. I was somewhat insulted with some of his picks, because then he had the Steelers obviously he has them losing against the Patriots or whatever, losing to the Rams, but then I forgot who he had them beating, but then they get swept by the Browns, and I think split with the Ravens and Bengals, and I'm just kind of like, okay, more realistically is a split, but I don't think they're going to split the entire division.
Yeah, no, I look, here's the thing, and I'm going to use an unfriendly term. So MJD is butt buddies with Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, he is.
And he continues to be butthurt about the way that the Steelers, quote unquote, treated Le'Veon Bell, feeling like because they didn't, I guess, say, "Oh, we'll give you everything you want, you spoiled brat of a child." Even if it isn't fair to both of us, it's just fair to you. It's not even fair to you. It's just extravagant. And we don't believe you could get exactly what you want anywhere else, which they were right. Mm-hmm. And we're going to offer you a better contract than anybody else, but you're going to turn it down. Somehow that still equates in MJD's mind as the Steelers they didn't want to pay Le'Veon Bell. They weren't fair to Le'Veon Bell. So he's got a bug up his butt. And for this little weeble of a ex-player,
bowling ball.
I'm sorry, yeah, bowling ball. Look, I get it. You don't like the Steelers, fine. At least back off of that a little bit and show some professionalism in the way you're picking, because you're ridiculous. And the gentleman he was picking with was Admiral Akbar Abajabiamila, or whatever his name is.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's a trap.
Admiral Akbar. Yeah, it is a trap. This whole show's a trap.
Yeah. So, I see that and it annoys me. And I actually just got an NFL alert that the other Carr brother has now come up with some new things Ben has to do to be better than his brother. I haven't looked at it yet, but there's another quote-unquote expert who, in my mind, is a moron.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm going to segue into, I'm going back to my trusty Lindy's, where they talk about players and units overall, NFL's best. And they actually have Ben as fifth in pocket passers. He's not listed under all-purpose. Of course, Aaron Rodgers is number one there, even though blah, blah. Anyway, with Russell Wilson and somehow Andrew Luck after that too. Does Andrew Luck run with the football a lot? I'm not familiar. That I wouldn't necessarily put Luck in with like Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, and Dak Prescott. But maybe he does. Maybe my eyeball test is deceiving me. Maybe they still have AB as the deep threat, number one wide receiver. Juju Smith-Schuster is all the way at the bottom here at 15. And this is out of the wide receiver one. So it goes AB, Julio, Tyreek Hill with an asterisk, obviously, for what's going on there. T.Y. Hilton, Odell Beckham, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, that's a lot of good wide receivers, right? A.J. Green, Amari Cooper, Josh Gordon, status pending. This guy is status pending, did not even play to finish the year, and he's listed 10th over Adam Thielen, Devontae Adams, Deshaun Jackson, who's just returning to Philadelphia, Brandon Cooks, and then it's Juju Smith-Schuster, Kenny Stills, and Sammy Watkins, all tied for 15. One of these things is not like the other. Juju, Kenny Stills, Sammy Watkins. I want to bang my head against the desk, Brian. I don't even know what to do with that. We'll come back to that because we're going to talk Juju a little more too, because people are kind of crapping on him a lot. You go around and it has ranking by team passing game. Cleveland is ranked number one in the AFC over the Chargers, Chiefs, Colts, Texans, and Patriots. Radio silence. Okay. Let me go to the running backs. All-purpose running backs. All-purpose, right? Le'Veon Bell ranked number one. Didn't even play last year. Forget about it. He's number one. Saquon Barkley. Okay, I can't argue. Christian McCaffrey, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon. Okay. Kamara, sure. I think Kamara should be ranked a little higher here.
Yeah, I agree.
Joe Mixon?
No.
I don't know that he's necessarily – is he a hands guy? Devontae Freeman. a guy who has always had another running back in the backfield with him by committee.
And who's hurt a lot.
And then James White, who really doesn't run the ball. That's why they brought Sony Michel in. But, he's all-purpose. Okay, he's all-purpose. He's versatile. I could kind of get that. So those are the top 10 all-purpose. And then they break it down into ground-based. And you have Ezekiel Elliott as ground-based. He's number 1. So I guess he's just ground-based, not Devontae Freeman. Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette, Nick Chubb, Philip Lindsay, Chris Carson, Jordan Howard, Dalvin Cook. Oh, hello there, James Conner at number 9.
Yeah.
So James Conner, who makes the Pro Bowl, is not one of the all-purpose running backs overall. I think he was like 5th or 6th in overall receptions last season, and I'm actually going to drag this statistic out here in a second and find out precisely what his numbers were, because to me that seemed insulting to just call him a ground-based running back and then have him 9th, although that is a little more flattering than when some of these other rankings we come up with where they put these guys.
Yeah, look, I have to make this mention of Josh Gordon, because that, to me, in the stats that they have, or in the rankings that they're going to put out, is so egregiously stupid that I feel like I have to state this. In the past 4 seasons, Josh Gordon does not have 100 receptions. Okay? That's because he couldn't play during 2 of them. And when he finally did, with New England last year, he had 40. So, and that was with the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady. Everybody thought, here you go. Okay, Josh Gordon, Tom Brady, it's going to be Randy Moss all over again. Greatest quarterback of all time. 40 receptions. Give me a break.
It's a Kit Kat commercial. Really, give me a break.
Yeah. 3 touchdowns, 40 receptions in 11 games. I'm just not that impressed. I'm sorry. There's absolutely no validity to having Josh Gordon even on that list at this point.
Yeah.
And he's not in the league. He's not even in the league right now.
I think I tend to like Hines Ward as my all-around go-to wide receiver 1. So
yeah, there you go. I get it. You write these books up, but you had to have written this stuff up before or after he was out of the league. So what are you doing? Oh, let's just include him. Apparently, and Sacktown Steelers, you can tell me if I've got this right. Apparently, the guys at Lindy's are all on his nuts.
Some of this is okay. Like Christian McCaffrey all around. I mean, the guy had 107 receptions.
No complaints. Yeah.
Saquon Barkley caught 91 balls. James White caught 87. Kamara caught 81. When you go ground-based in the 5th best receiving running back or performance last year was Ezekiel Elliott, how can you not call him an all-around running back? Jalen Richard, Nyheim Hines, and then you got Todd Gurley, Dion Lewis, and then James Conner is 10th actually in the receptions. I thought I had him at like 5th or 6th. I was wrong. But still, that puts him ahead of, who else is this all-purpose? Well, let's go with more receiving here. Okay, TJ Yeldon, Kenyon Drake. Oh, hello, Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, Duke Johnson, Joe Mixon, Delvin Cook. You're going down this list here, and it's like, okay, well, all right, Philip Lindsay only caught 35 balls. It's like, where's your cutoff at to consider someone all-purpose? When Ezekiel Elliott has 77 receptions, which is more, I'm going to bet that's more than Sammy Watkins last year. How much you want to bet? When they put Sammy Watkins, maybe that's why Sammy's at 15, where Juju should not be ranked. Sammy Watkins, let's see here. He had 40 receptions last year. Okay, so he played 10 games. He missed 6 games. You double that, that's 80. Zeke, and let's just say you double his number. Or you wouldn't even double his number because it's not double the games. Well, let's just double the number. Let's just say he had like a bunch of big games, and then he doesn't. And give him 80 receptions. It's still only 3 more than Zeke. I just, sometimes it like just destroys the credibility of some of these things that I read in these magazines. So that's not where I'm finishing here, Brian. And I already lost my spot, so bear with me, folks. Ranking by team, running game. AFC, Chargers, Titans, Jets, Bengals, Broncos. I'm like, I mean, okay, you want Melvin Gordon. You think Derrick Henry comes out and he has like a big game like on Monday night. Is that all that people saw of him last year? Because it's just like, maybe he's finally come around. He was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. He had 12 TDs. Maybe he just come around, or maybe it's a flash in the pan. There are games here. He started the season 26 yards, 56, 57, 24, 56, 21, 33, 27. Then he had 58, 46, 30, and 40. We haven't even gotten to a 100-yard game, and we are 12 games into the season here. Then he had that big game against the Jaguars for 238 yards and 4 TDs, followed it up with 33 carries for 170 yards. That's a little over 5 per carry and 2 TDs, 21 for 84 and 16 for 93. So they started running the football, apparently, for some reason or other. Could it have been that, Marcus Mariota was a little hurt last year? It doesn't necessarily mean that the guy is like a top, world beater of, a running back necessarily. So I just think that the disrespect there for James Conner and the over respect of a guy who sat out an entire year in the NFL is just a little bit wild there. And I mean, that pretty much almost folds up the rankings here. They do have offensive line. They do have the Steelers 1 in the AFC, which is quite surprising. I'll leave the rest of the spoilers to the defense. The Steelers don't rank there whatsoever, so they don't have them listed as good for anything. They do have Cam Hayward as one of the defensive end, defensive tackle type 3-4 guys. He's like in the top 5 where he does belong. He's had 20 sacks in the last 2 years. So I just kind of want to go. The one individual we didn't talk about too much here, Brian, is Ben Roethlisberger. And it's like, how much disrespect is there to this guy? We were already talking about him, pretty much on the previous show about game-winning drives and everything like that. Nobody ever thinks of him. They think of all these other people. They think much more of Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
So Pete Prisco, CBS Sports, puts out his top 100 players, right? And
yep.
I really struggled with not putting a quarterback number 1 overall, but I had to put Aaron Donald here. Well, he's pretty much the most dominant player. He's very much an MVP lately, and he deserved the money that they paid him. Patrick Mahomes, number 2. Hard to argue with what he did last year, and will he do it again? And then number 3 is Aaron Rodgers. I'm like shaking my head. You got Von Miller, Khalil Mack, Tom Brady, Julio. I've never been a Julio fan, but DeAndre Hopkins, Bobby Wagner, and J.J. Watt close out the top 10. I don't know that I would put Aaron Rodgers as the number 3 in the top NFL 100. I mean, I'm vomiting in my mouth and swallowing it just by talking about Aaron Rodgers being ranked over Tom Brady. I mean, or Drew Brees. I don't even remember where Drew Brees was on this list. It just gets stupid because you have Michael Thomas 14. I think Michael Thomas might be the best wide receiver in the NFL currently. I think Juju is going to make a claim for top 10, maybe even top 5. If he doesn't do it this year, he will be in the near future. You go and try and find Drew Brees on this list. He's down at 19, just ahead of like Andrew Luck. And then, we haven't named any Steelers yet. I'm going to ask you, I think you already saw this and you know the answer, but how many Steelers are in Pete Prisco's top NFL 100 list?
I actually will freely admit not to having read this yet, partly because I knew it was going to aggravate me. So I'm going to just throw a number out and we'll see, because I've been pretty good with these lately. 4.
Oh, nope. Sorry. You get the sitcom / game show host.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, you hit the whammy. The first one shows up number 45 on the list is Juju Smith-Schuster, and the only other guy on this list that's a Pittsburgh Steeler is Ben Roethlisberger.
2?
Just 2.
2?
Just 2. I mean, I don't know. Is he being fair? I mean, there's 32 NFL teams and 32 times 3. Yeah, there should be at least 3 if you're going an average within 100. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what to say about that. I mean, I try not to lose sleep over this type of stuff, to be completely honest. It kind of surprises me. It's like Eric Weddle's on here. It's 76. And I'm just like, oh, well, we're still thinking Eric Weddle's got something to give, I guess. Jared Goff makes the list. Yeah, man, okay, people are excited about him. And, you know, I don't know what else to say. Baker Mayfield is on at 89. And, you know, there's some other ones here, like Bradley Chubb ends up showing up. I mean, he's trying to project who the best players are going to be. So, you know, I don't know. He does have, just missing the list, though, Cam Hayward and David DeCastro, which I find kind of surprising. I would think that at least one or the other or both might slide in. I'm not going to go through every single guy that's on this list. It just goes to show you when you're looking at this type of stuff and we're talking about people who don't get respect. The quarterbacks listed after Ben are Cam Newton, Carson Wentz. I mean, Cam Newton's in at 72. Wentz is in at like 74. Jared Goff at 82, as I mentioned. Baker Mayfield at 89. And then no one else. You start to look at who was ahead of Ben on this list as far as quarterbacks. And obviously we already mentioned like Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. Phillip Rivers all the way up at number 35. He is an even better player than Juju Smith-Schuster will be this year, which, you know, when has he ever done? Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson are at 27 and 28. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't know about Matt Ryan. You put Matt Ryan up there. You know I like Russell Wilson, so I can't. You know, one of these days we're going to talk about our favorite non-Steelers, and he's probably one of my current ones. You get, and then it's Drew Brees, Andrew Luck, Tom Brady. So you have Ben as basically the 7th best quarterback on the top 100 list, and that's where everybody usually ends up putting him. I always try and make an argument to put him in the top 5. And, you know, based on what Rodgers hasn't done, I'm sorry, he may be 8. I forgot about Mahomes. Mahomes was ahead of Aaron Rodgers. So it was Mahomes, Rodgers, Brady, Brees, Luck. There's your 5. Ryan, Wilson, and Rivers. Damn, that puts him in 9, doesn't it? Jeez, oh man. I mean, that's blasphemy. You know what I mean? And this is just that's not right. I feel like I'm going to be smited for saying that.
Smited. And let me just smited. Let me just mention one brief thing. You talked about our favorite non-Steelers. I hate everybody. There's none. No such animal. Okay.
Wait. We did have a DraftKings league the year before, I want to say, with Brian involved in it, and he tried to make a team of nothing but Steelers players, so he's not lying. However, at the running back position, in order to be competitive, he couldn't just roll with Le'Veon Bell, so he had to spend the money and pony up for Ezekiel Elliott. So he made one concession there that I will say he has done in the past.
Yes, when I have no choice, I fall back on Buckeyes, even though Zeke is dead to me because he's a Cowboy. But okay, let me. This is T.J. Watt? No T.J. Watt?
No, not at all.
What kind of craziness is this? Okay, well, let me just say this then, Mr. Whatever your name is, Pete Driscoll. Is that his name? Yeah, Pete Driscoll or Prisco. Screw you. There you go. That's what I got for you, Pete. You come at me, Pete. You're a moron.
He's usually fair with the Steelers. I'll give him that much.
Get off my lawn.
It's a very hard list. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, but it's hard to ignore. I understand the Pro Bowl. A lot of its popularity. You got the guys who play in the Super Bowl that you have to take into consideration too. So by the time you take AFC and NFC rosters with the players who didn't accept the invitation, the honor of playing wherever the heck, Orlando in the rain, and then the Super Bowl guys, you probably have a good 100 players, give or take here or there, and then you have to make concessions for guys who are injured. I don't think he had rookies listed on this list anywhere. I think he completely left rookies off, which was kind of interesting because I've always made this argument about, we always talk about this. Eric always tries to bring me back down to earth with it, and I'm always thinking it's based on 2018 going into 19. He's saying, no, it's just basically based on projections for 2019. But we've found in the past that that's not always true, that there's certain players that are completely ignored. I think J.J. Watt was ignored the one year. It was like he was coming off an injury, and it was just like, well, they're not basing this on his 2019 or or on his upcoming season. They're basing this on the past season, and then they leave somebody off like last year. I don't think the NFL has done theirs yet. The weekly reveal of 10 batches of 10, but they didn't have like Saquon Barkley on it last year as a rookie, for example. So, these type of things, they're fun to talk about. It's fun to get a little aggravated with where they put things and everything. It's just the one thing that really makes me wonder is like Ben Roethlisberger should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think anyone's questioning that. Is it really because of all the other people that he plays that are currently playing where he doesn't get the same level of respect as, say, Tom Brady or Drew Brees or even like Aaron Rodgers? You know what I mean? We've been dogging Aaron Rodgers, and we say he's kind of fringe. If he has a couple more of these big passing seasons, I mean, he's a shoo-in. I mean, there's no question about it. But banged up, short bodies of work don't always mean that guys get into the Hall of Fame. I think Terrell Davis was like kind of a fan, he was very dominant as a running back because that was always questioned too. He didn't play a whole lot of time, and there are other players that you could point out. But Ben, overall, I mean, he has the hardware to prove it. He's never lost. And I think a lot of people still, for whatever reason, they don't see all the wide receivers that have been made famous by him over the years, all the guys who have had productive careers. Hines Ward was already here, but Hines Ward, he flourished with Ben. I mean, you have guys like Antoine Randall L. I mean, obviously we've mentioned like Santonio Holmes and Mike Wallace and Emmanuel Sanders and AB and now Juju and all of this plethora. It's just the wide receiver factory. And everybody talks about how the Steelers have this wide receiver factory. Well, they haven't had the same position coach this entire time. The only constant has been Big Ben Roethlisberger. And I just, to coin your Rodney Dangerfield, if people don't know who Rodney Dangerfield is, look him up. You'll know instantly. If you saw his, you'll see his name in a dictionary under "I get no respect." Ben Roethlisberger gets no respect.
No respect at all. And that's obvious. I think that's a given. We know that this is in fact the case. And I don't know what the aggravation is. Again, I don't know what the animosity is. Maybe it's because Ben's just not that, friendly to the media in some ways. He has that weird, dry sense of humor where sometimes he makes jokes that only Ben gets. And, I get it. So maybe they just aren't warm to him. And this is a result of that. But you can't question his stats. You can't question what he's done. None of those things. And I find that the more people who do these top 100 lists and the more people, it'll be a whole nother level of annoyance when the NFL's official top 100 players comes out because it's just always wrong. And I looked at a list real quickly while you were talking. I don't have a huge problem with a lot of the top names in the list, but it's as you start to get down, there are certainly player. I don't have a problem with Aaron Donald being number one.
No, not at all. And that's not being a Pitt homer because I'm anything but a Pitt homer.
Yeah, I do have a problem with Julio Jones being the 7th best player in the NFL at this point in his career. Even if you're trying to project to next year, that's absurd. I get it. Julio's been great, but over the past few seasons, not so much because he's been hurt. And again, we just said that with A.J. Green. Once receivers start to get dinged up and they fall into this pattern of injury, play 6 games, play 8 games, play 10 games, you know what? They're never quite the same. So to project him as the 7th best player in the NFL, that's nonsense. It's silliness. It's the crack talking or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't answer that. But and I didn't mention this when you talked about Lindsay saying that the Jets had the number 3 rushing offense. I get it. Everybody is still on Le'Veon Bell's nuts because he was a top running back when he last touched the football. You're projecting awful hard at the Jets this year on a guy who is going to be the focal point of every defense to stop with an offensive line that doesn't understand how he runs the ball and hasn't had the opportunity to really work with him at length. Yeah, I'll buy it when I see it. I think Le'Veon Bell will get touches, no question about it. I don't know that Le'Veon Bell is going to have the kind of success he had in years past. And I'll believe it when I see it. I'm I'm skeptical at this point.
As you should be, for all the reasons you said, and also I don't think he's going to be a wide receiver 2 anymore either. I mean, you could have Darnold drop off to him, but I think you're asking for an awful lot from Darnold to make some of these Ben miraculous shovel passes and dink dunk type things that Ben does that only Ben's capable of doing. And it's just not going to work that way. So we are up against it, folks. We always appreciate you tuning into the show. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Brian, any closing thoughts? Any other things that have got under your skin lately? Steelers related, buddy. Steelers related. Keep it clean.
There's way too many other things that I just figure I'll let them go. I just want to say I'm prepping myself for the rest of the offseason and the rest of the onset of all of this. Who's the greatest players in the NFL nonsense that's going to happen? Somebody's going to throw Baker Mayfield into a top 10 list of something, and I'm going to freak out.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see more from him. I'm not necessarily trashing the young talent. It's going to be interesting to see if all that stuff meshes. If it does, man, I mean, it could be dynamite. If they don't, it's going to be disappointing for that fan base that's up there. And I think that's what a lot of people, I think they look at it like anything else, like the Cubs or the St. Louis Blues or somebody like that. Everybody loves the loser. They want to see them. Everybody loves the loser until they're a winner, right? So there's a lot of Steelers haters. There's a lot of Patriots haters. I mean, I don't know anybody on this show that hates the Patriots. I mean, we respect them, right? Anything like that, even like the Ravens, or just pick anything, the Yankees, for everything they do. Of course, they buy everything, so who cares? I'm trolling some other people who might be some crossover fans in other parts of the country, and I don't care at this point. But anyways, we do appreciate you for listening. We only care about Steelers here, so if you're part of Steelers Nation, we still love you, even if you don't necessarily always agree with us, but you should. Anyways, until next time, my name's Joe, his name's Brian. We encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.